So when you approach like a piece, for instance, about, the average 10-year-old boy, do you think in the back of your mind, like somehow I have to transcend this subject and it has to be about, something bigger? Or do you approach it like very sort of earnestly, like this is a story about a 10-year-old boy, and then if anything else, how do you sort of negotiate like making, because I think that piece is a great example of something that is seemingly extremely ordinary, but in this, in the specificity of the details about this 10-year-old boy, we start to think like, what is the meaning of us? Are we doing anything more important than like wrapping fishing line around our backyard? It like gets you to a bigger place. But I just kind of wondered, maybe I know a bunch of the Niemans have read that. I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about kind of how you approach that piece and that subject.
Yeah. Oh well, let me give you a little bit of background on the story, just because it has a peculiar origin, and it's a good, in terms of sort of illustrating the way that I've kind of conducted my career, it's probably a good example. But it does have a funny backstory, which is I was approached by the editor-in-chief at Esquire, and who said, we're doing a big package, this issue, it's the American Man, and we're going to have the American Man at various ages, and would you like to do the American Man age 10, and we've already chosen the American Man age 10, and it's Macaulay Culkin, the actor. And I had never written for Esquire, so my first reaction was, oh my God, I'm being offered an assignment for Esquire. And then the second overriding impulse, which I still can't believe I had the nerve, but I just thought, but I don't want to write about Macaulay Culkin. I mean, who cares about Macaulay Culkin? For a couple of reasons. One is, having done celebrity profiles, I knew that you never really get beyond, particularly with a kid, you would never get beyond what the celebrity has decided to deliver to you. Mm-hmm. And in the case of a kid, there would be a handler there the whole time. And, I just thought, I don't want to do that story. But also I thought, honestly, Macaulay Culkin is a one-off. Most 10-year-olds do not have a driver and an agent. And there was a moment where I thought, I've never thought about this before, but what is it like to be a 10-year-old boy? I had no idea. I didn't have kids at the time. I had no clue. And I thought, oh my God, I'm so curious about that. And I said to my editor at Esquire, I'd love to do the story, but can I just pick an average boy? And credit to Esquire for saying yes, because what could be less marketable than a profile of an average suburban kid?
10-year-old, yeah.
And first of all, I didn't know any 10-year-old boys, so there was a first issue, which is how I would find one.
And vet him for you.
And, I would call my friends and say, do you know any 10-year-old boys? And there's like this long silence, like, why? Secondly, I was living in Manhattan, and I did not want a boy in Manhattan because I felt that is a very particular childhood, and I was trying to find something that was, there is no typical, but at least an example of a childhood that would be fairly familiar to a lot of people. And through asking enough friends who, if they knew 10-year-old boys, I eventually was introduced to this kid who lived in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, whose parents were really wonderful, and they said, if he wants to do it, that's fine. This young man, Colin Duffy, said, yeah, sure, whatever, which I now understand is the classic response from a 10-year-old boy. And just as an aside, I have to tell you, because there was this, I've never done war reporting, but I would say this counts as combat duty, because I showed up. My plan was, I'm just going to shadow this kid for a week. I'm going to go to school with him. I'm going to just spend day and night with him and then write a story. I showed up Monday morning, and I think it suddenly dawned on him that an adult female was going to accompany him to school. And he, I think, had that like, oh my God, this is too weird. And he shunned me. He totally shunned me. I mean, I remember following him to school. It was I was like 10 paces behind him, sort of walking like this. And so he was totally uncomfortable and embarrassed and sort of baffled, like, what are you doing here? And I got to his classroom and had to like squish myself into those little chairs.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't talk to me. And this was a great moment for me in a lot of ways, because it, besides being absolutely sort of staggered by the impossibility of my task, I also had the crisis of faith that's very, I have to say, common to every story I've ever done, which is to think, why would anyone care about this story? Who cares? He's a typical 10-year-old boy in the suburbs. Why would anyone care? And it's a really uncomfortable place from which I have to sort of claw out of, because the reality is, you can make the argument that no one cares. It's not a celebrity. It's not breaking news. It's not a matter of urgency. But the other part of me believes that that is, it's a mission that is important for writers, which is to look at what we call ordinary life, which I'm always a little uncomfortable using that term, but the fact is to look at the commonplace, to look at what's right in front of us that we've never really examined or considered, or, you know, we assume we know, but we don't. And that there's an enormous value to it, but it takes, there's a kind of confidence that can be really, you know, I can lose at some point. It's a lot easier to profile a celebrity